Hello, everyone, and welcome to the recording of the 101 Introduction to EPR for Paper and Packaging Laws in the United States. This recording is from July 9th, 2025, and the information presented reflects the most current details available as of July 2025. Starting with our legal disclaimer, this is a reminder that Circular Action Alliance is not an attorney nor law firm and does not provide legal advice or recommendations. Please do not take our advice as such. Information in this presentation is not substitute for the advice of an attorney. Please seek the advice of legal counsel as necessary. Our antitrust reminder. As with the nature of EPR, there are many competitors on this call, so please do not discuss any of the topics on the right. CAA will not discuss any of the topics on the right in order to comply with federal, state, and international antitrust or competition laws. Some welcome reminders. As a reminder, this is the 101 onboarding session, and this session will focus on providing an overview of EPR, CAA, and provide resources to help you determine if you should register with CAA. This webinar is the first session in our three-part onboarding series. We also have our 102 that focuses on registration and agreements and dives deeper into discussing the Participant Producer Agreement, the PPA, and state addenda. Additionally, we have our 103 webinar that discusses budgeting for EPR fees and dives into an overview of how EPR fees are set. For any questions related to registration, please email producer.support@circularaction.org. For today's agenda, we plan to provide an EPR overview, an overview on CAA, dive into EPR across the states, give state updates, share some information on producer registration and preparedness, and lastly, leave any questions in the end for you. Okay, starting with what is EPR? Well, extended producer responsibility, or EPR, is a policy approach that shifts financial and sometimes operational responsibility for the recycling / end-of-life management of a product to companies that produce the material. EPR laws for paper and packaging require producers to either partially or fully fund the collection, sorting, and processing of the paper, packaging, and packaging-like items that they supply into these states. Since producers are made responsible for the cost to manage their products and packaging at the end of life, EPR fees typically incentivize design choices that improve recyclability, minimize waste, and improve environmental outcomes. They do this through what's called eco-modulation. Producer fees will be impacted by eco-modulation factors such as incentivizing increased use of recycled content or switching to reusable packaging through lowered fees. Okay, what is a PRO? A producer responsibility organization, or PRO, is a producer-led nonprofit organization that provides producers with compliance services to help them meet their obligations under EPR laws. Generally, a PRO is responsible for developing a program plan for managing covered products. The plan is reviewed by a state-appointed advisory board and approved by the state regulatory agency. The program plan outlines the program operation and the collection and management of producer fees. Currently, CAA has published program plans for both Oregon and Colorado. Some states, like Maine, refer to PROs as stewardship organizations, or SOs. For context of the US laws, SOs and PROs are the same thing, just with a different name. All right, packaging EPR in the US. Currently, there are multiple states that have passed EPR laws in the United States. Of those states, CAA has been selected as the PRO in Oregon, California, Colorado, and Minnesota, and CAA has been selected as the PRO on the Advisory Council in Maryland. Maine enacted their EPR law, and Illinois is in the early stages of doing a needs assessment. Additionally, Maryland officially signed and passed their EPR law, SB 901, in May, and Washington State passed their EPR law, SB 5284, also in May 2025. Okay, a little bit about Circular Action Alliance. Circular Action Alliance, or CAA, is a U.S. producer responsibility organization, or PRO, dedicated to implementing effective extended producer responsibility, or EPR, laws for paper and packaging. As a nonprofit producer led organization, CAA is committed to helping producers comply with EPR laws, delivering harmonized, best in class compliance services, and working with governments, businesses, and communities to reduce waste and recycle more. CAA was founded in 2022 and is guided by producers representing the food, beverage, consumer goods, and retail industries. CAA is the only organization approved to implement US EPR laws for paper and packaging and is operating as the single PRO in California, Colorado, Oregon, and Minnesota. CAA has also been selected to represent the producer interests and the PRO on the State Producer Responsibility Advisory Council in Maryland. Okay, CAA's mission is to help producers comply with EPR laws, deliver harmonized, best in class services, and work with governments, businesses, and communities to reduce waste and recycle more. In order to meet our mission, CAA will meet state specific regulatory requirements, leverage existing recycling systems and infrastructure, and advance the circularity of covered materials through the collaboration with local governments, service providers, and recycling system stakeholders. Okay, and now we will talk about what EPR looks like across the US states. As you can see, each program varies slightly in scope. In the covered materials column, you'll notice that all of the states include product packaging in the scope of their program, but the definition of packaging does, however, vary slightly from state to state, so it's important to refer to each state's definition so you can be clear as to whether the materials are covered. Additionally, you will notice that all 7 states also include food serviceware in their covered materials. Oregon, Colorado, Minnesota, and Washington also all include printing or papered products. This includes items like printed paper, catalogs, magazines, coupons, and other similar items. Looking at the sectors column, you can see that all 7 states include consumer packaging or B2C packaging in the scope of their EPR law, but only Oregon and California include business to business or B2B packaging in the scope of their laws. Lastly, you can see in the third column whether the EPR law in each state requires that the recycling system is either partially or fully funded by the program. Okay, now let's look at the producer obligations across each of the states. As you can see, all 7 of these states require producers to join an approved PRO and collect and report data to a PRO, pay fees or dues based on the data submitted, and have a potential redesign of materials or delivery methods of those materials. 3 states, California, Maine, and Maryland, also require a reduction plan in the use of plastics within their law. And some states have future requirements that require all packaging materials to be either recyclable or compostable. All right, here's some key points on those last 2 compliance obligations that were discussed on the previous slide. The requirement for all packaging to be recyclable or compostable is an individual compliance obligation. This means that it applies to all producers and all covered materials under the EPR laws. Each producer is responsible for ensuring their packaging meets this standard. On the other hand, the plastic source reduction requirement is an industry-wide goal. Producers as a whole must collectively reduce plastic use by 25%. This is not a target for each individual producer. CAA, as the PRO, will lead efforts to implement this reduction across the industry in states where source reduction is required. Each producer will need to develop a reduction plan, but they aren't required to meet the full 25% reduction on their own. CAA will coordinate across all producers to help the entire industry reach the 25 plastic reduction target by the set date. Okay, and with that, I will pass it over to Matt to talk about some state updates.
Thanks, Savannah. Appreciate it. I think we can go ahead and go to the next slide here. Alrighty, we'll go through a few different state updates in a little bit more detail than Savannah provided before. And again, this is recorded in July of 2025, so we're providing you the most current information regarding these states. In California, there is the informal rulemaking process for the draft regulations is still underway. Now, for producers, some important dates to consider are August 1st, when the producer registration portal opens. There's a deadline there of September 5th. And then the actual reporting portal opens for California in September 15th, with the producer reporting deadline of November 15th of 2025. For Colorado, CAA has just recently submitted its amended program plan that was in June of 2025. The final plan is expected to be approved by CDPHE prior to Colorado's program start, which is January 1st, 2026. So we're expecting that program plan to be approved in December. Producers must report by July 31st of 2025. So that is the next big important deadline. If you're watching this and it's maybe after July 31st, you will still accept late reports, but please get those in as soon as possible. And for Oregon, CA submitted its program plan in December, and it was approved by Oregon DEQ in February of 2025. The reporting deadline for producers was March 31st, 2025, and as of July 1st, it is now officially the first program to actually begin. So Oregon is the first state program in the US. So again, just like Colorado, if you're watching this and you may have missed some of these deadlines, for Oregon, it is not too late to register and report your supply data for Oregon. Please do that as soon as possible. I think we can go to the next slide. Great. For Minnesota, CA is approved as the initial pro. The needs assessment process is underway for to inform the program plan, which there's a first draft due in 2027. Obligated producers must have joined CAA by July 1st of 2025. So CAA's portal is open for producer registration. I'll be talking a little bit more about that a little later in this presentation. And the consultation for the Minnesota Interim State Addendum, or the MNINSA, will run from late June to mid-July. So if you're watching this before the 18th, feel free to submit your feedback to CAA. If not, the final version of the MNINSA is expected to be released for signature by producers in early August. In Maryland, CA is the appointed pro and serves as the single pro representative on Maryland's Producer Responsibility Advisory Council. Maryland's EPR packaging law was officially passed in April, and it was signed into law in May. And now Maryland's Department of the Environment will begin the regulatory process with the aim of being completed in the fall of 2025. Maine's EPR bill was signed by the governor in late June. Maine is not expected to select a stewardship organization until early 2026, and startup fees are due to the stewardship organization in September of 2026, with the first packaging material fees due in September of 2027. And lastly, our last state update here is Washington, which also just recently passed their EPR law. So a lot of 2026 dates for Washington. January 1st, a pro is appointed and the EPR Advisory Council is formed. Producer participation is mandatory by July 1st of 2026. So as a producer or potential producer, if you're listening to this recording, that's the important date for Washington for you. Later in 2026, there will be a statewide recyclable materials list published, followed by the Washington Department of Ecology conducting a statewide recycling system needs assessment, and an update will be done to that the following year at the end of 2027. Okay, now I think we're ready to talk a little bit about producer registration and preparedness. Great. Here is a high-level look at the producer journey. So the first step for producers is to register with CAA, which involves filling out the registration form, signing the Participant Producer Agreement, or the PPA, and signing the state addenda for any states that you've indicated your registration in. These are all legal agreements that outline the obligations of producers and CAA. Once registered, producers gain access to educational forums and resources, including detailed reporting guidance to help prepare producers for reporting deadlines. As of July, the recording of this, 2025, CAA is still accepting registrations in Colorado, California, Oregon, and Minnesota. The second step after registering is to prepare to report and submit your supply data. CAA has resources to support producers in determining their obligations, and some of these include onboarding sessions, guidance on covered materials and producer definitions, reporting workshops, monthly webinars to support preparation for upcoming deadlines, and FAQs that are hosted on our website under the Producer Resource Center. After reporting, the last step is to pay producer fees. Now, in Colorado, these are called dues, but functionally, they are the same thing, and you will pay those directly to CAA. So how do I know if I'm an obligated producer? This is a great first question to ask, and I'll actually answer this by splitting this up into two primary questions that businesses need to ask to help determine if they are obligated under EPR laws. So the first of these sub-questions are the materials associated with my products covered by the EPR laws? And the second is my business the responsible producer for those materials? So I'll start with a little bit more information on this first sub-question. Are the materials associated with my products covered by the EPR laws? EPR laws for packaging and paper vary from state to state, but are generally designed to apply to single-use packaging, paper, and some disposable products. As a first step in the process of identifying whether your company has obligations under an EPR law, companies should review with their attorneys the definitions of each material type to determine whether the materials associated with the products placed in the state market are subject to EPR laws. So second, companies should review the producer hierarchy associated with the covered materials to determine if their business is the obligated producer for those materials. And now moving on to the second sub-question, which is my business the responsible producer for those materials? So only the company identified as the obligated producer for the particular material type will need to report and pay fees. Generally, primary obligation is placed on the brand owner, and only in rare circumstances may the packaging manufacturer be obligated as the producer. However, some states like Oregon allow the reporting and fee payment obligations to be passed from the obligated producer to another entity in the supply chain if both mutually agree to this arrangement. CAA will provide additional guidance on sharing responsibility. Okay, I think we're ready to go to the next slide. Great, here is a quick overview of the registration process producers will go to. As of late June, we've had over 3,500 producers register with CAA. So the first step is to complete that registration form on CAA's website. The form will ask you to provide company information and contact information for a primary contact and an authorized representative. The primary contact is just as it sounds, the first person that CAA will reach out to. They'll also receive all of CAA's updates. And the authorized representative is going to be the one who signs these legal agreements like the PPA and the Oregon State Addendum on behalf of your organization. So after submitting the registration form, CAA will process your information and send your company a copy of the PPA via DocuSign. Once the PPA is signed, you'll gain access to the reporting guidance and will be sent portal credentials for reporting state reports in CAA's portal to meet those deadlines. For each state where you are obligated in, companies will sign a specific state addendum that outlines state-specific requirements and formalizes your obligations. Not all state addenda are finalized, as they are dependent on the finalization of EPR regulations in states where CAA operates, and thus, as of July 2025, only the Oregon and Colorado state addenda have been finalized currently and sent to producers to sign. Each state addendum will be developed by CAA and be provided to producers and will include state-specific policies, procedures, rules, and requirements applicable to the producer in that state. State addenda will not be required to access the guidebook, but will be required to submit data to CAA in the producer portal. After both the PPA and state addenda have been signed, producers will have the ability to submit a supply report in the producer portal. The supply report will determine the amount of fees a producer will pay for the specific state program they submitted for. Let's go to the next slide here. Wonderful. Some key producer dates, which we've mentioned a little bit, but here's just a nice slide that condenses these into a single slide for these 4 states where CAA is the approved pro. So again, for Oregon, the program launch was July 1st. Prior to that, producers were to submit reports by March 31st using 2024 calendar year data. Upcoming dates for Oregon include Bonus A LCA reports being due August 15th. The 2026 EPR fee schedule will be published October 1st of 2025, and that will be prior to invoicing for the 2026 Oregon year towards December or in December prior to January 1st. In Colorado, the reporting portal is open and producers are to submit supply reports by July 31st using calendar year data 2024. Just like Oregon, the dues, instead of fees, dues will be published in October prior to the Colorado start date of January 1st of 2026. In California, registration opens August 1st. The deadline for that is September 15th. And the reporting portal is opening 2 months before the reporting deadline of November 15th. That will be data year 2023. So unlike Oregon and Colorado, which use 2024 data, one important distinction is to remember that California's first report that is due November 15th, 2025, uses calendar year 2023 data. Lastly, for Minnesota, the registration deadline was July 1st. The reporting portal is scheduled to open August 1st, and an interim report that is just a revenue tier only. That is not a material category report. So is a very quick one. That is going to be open around the fall, maybe late September, and you can report that September 26th. Okay, here is another slide on compliance actions. As we just ran through a lot of these on the last ones, on the last slide, I will not go through this in full detail, but you're more than welcome to pause this video and take a look and make sure that you are up to date on all of these deadlines. Great, so to double click a little bit on Minnesota registration, that deadline was, of course, July 1st, 2025. As of April 22 of 2025, excuse me, producers could now begin to register with CAA for their EPR obligations in Minnesota to meet that July 1st registration deadline. So even though the deadline has now passed, you are still able to register with CAA in Minnesota, and we request that you get that completed as soon as possible in the state if you believe you are obligated. So if you are on this call or you're listening in and you have not at all registered with CAA, the process for registering in Minnesota is exactly the same for the other three states that CAA is the approved pro. That'll be filling out that initial registration form that's linked on CAA's website and selecting Minnesota as a state that you believe you are obligated in. Now, if you instead may have filled out the registration form prior to April 22nd, when the registration first opened for Minnesota with CAA, you will not have been able to click Minnesota as a state that you could indicate your registration in. In this case, you will log into the producer portal and you will go to the state registration tab and indicate your Minnesota registration that way. The Minnesota interim state addendum is expected to be sent to producers for signature in early August. If you indicated your registration with CAA in Minnesota, so either of those two ways, either the initial registration form or in the producer portal, the Minnesota interim state addendum will be automatically sent to your authorized representative via DocuSign when it is available. As of this recording, the MNINSA is not yet available. A full Minnesota state addendum will be available at some point before the program launch, but that is expected in 2028. At that time, all companies who sign the interim addendum will also need to sign the full Minnesota state addendum. So this is specific to producers in Oregon. The 2025 Oregon producer fee schedule is now available and published. Invoices will be issued, if they haven't been already, for you and your business if you haven't reported yet. These fee rates for all current supply reports are submitted by producers. All producers pay the same fee rates. Now, if you've submitted a late report, it is possible that you are subject to late fees and interest. So please, if you're listening to this and you haven't yet reported for Oregon 2025, please do so as soon as possible. And to view the producer fee schedule, log into the producer portal, navigate to the useful links section on the homepage, and select the article titled 2025 Oregon Producer Fee Schedule. If you have other questions related to Oregon or any other state for that matter, you are more than welcome to reach out to producer.support@circularaction.org. Great, and this is a slide regarding vendor setup. So preparing to process your Oregon invoice, or if you've submitted in Colorado or California potentially for the first time, and you haven't submitted or you didn't have to submit in Oregon, this same slide applies to you. You will have to set CAA up as a vendor in your system so you can receive invoices. Invoices will be sent from the web address you see on the screen, and to avoid delays in receiving invoices, producers should contact their IT security team and request that inbound traffic from this email address is whitelisted. By default, invoices will be sent to the primary contact listed on your account. Now, if you've previously completed the vendor setup confirmation survey or provided CAA a unique billing contact, they will also receive the invoice. Great. As we begin to wrap up here, if you are on this call and you have not registered at all with CAA and you believe you are an obligated producer, please go ahead and begin your registration with CAA. And as one final reminder, producers who have missed deadlines are still required to register and report their data. And there is currently not a penalty for late registration. However, with Oregon's program starting July 1st, there are potential fees and impacts that you could face. So please make sure you get that done as soon as possible. Lastly, you are more than welcome to use this QR code to fill out the registration form on CAA's website. There is currently no fee to register with CAA and sign the participant producer agreement, the PPA, and registration can be amended or canceled at any time as needed. Great. So once again, we please encourage you to register. You are more than welcome to sign up for additional webinars hosted by CAA. You can find that on our website or use that bottom QR code on the screen there. Producer.support@circularaction.org is our general mailbox. If you have any questions related to a specific state or more general questions, you are more than welcome to email us there. And for registered producers, not only do we have the 100 series webinars, we also have a 200, 300, and a 400 series. So you can sign up for those again on the events page. And those are hosted by CAA on Zoom. My last note here is also, if you have not signed up for our monthly newsletter, I highly recommend you do that. You can also sign up on our website. But I believe that concludes our presentation for today. So thank you very much for listening, and we hope to see you again in a future webinar.